Hey, my name is Chris Fenwick, and I'm going to show you how I hook up Loopback, SoundDesk, and a Korg nanoKONTROL to my Mac for doing Zoom broadcasts. So let's take a look at my objectives here. First thing I want to do is I want to build a system that has zero latency for self-monitoring. I want to have individual application control. I want to be able to adjust the volume of each application easily. I want to have a broadcast output feed, so it's very easy for me to mute everything that I send out to the world. And I want to have hardware mixing interface. I want to be able to reach for a physical fader and be able to adjust things. All right, and the way we're going to do that, we're going to use two apps. One is Loopback and one is SoundDesk. Loopback we use for routing, and SoundDesk we use for mixing. Now, although I don't want to make this a big thing about the hardware, the audio interface device I use a MixPre-6, but you do have to understand some basic things about this audio interface, and it may help you with whatever audio interface that you're using. So first of all, if you look at the MixPre-6, why is it called 6? Because it has 6 channels, and yet I only see 4 knobs. That blows my mind and is wildly annoying. And so on the port side, you can see there's 2 inputs. There's 1 and 2, and then you have 3 and 4 on the starboard side. There's also there's this crappy little aux input thing. That's for 5 and 6, allegedly. And then your stereo output is there. But here's where the MixPre gets really interesting. Yes, there's 4 knobs. Yes, there's 4 inputs, mic pre's and a kind of 6. And yes, you have 2 outputs. But you also have 4 USB inputs and 8 USB outputs. And the inputs and outputs in the USB are actually more important than the analog inputs, although input 1 is my microphone, and that's what I have this plugged into. Okay, and then because I didn't have any way of reaching down and grabbing and adjusting 5/6, that's what caused me to sort of delve into the world of the nanoKONTROL, the MIDI control surface that allows me to touch a physical fader to adjust all of those inputs, all right? All right, what do we got next here? What I want to show you here, this is the first thing that you should build in Loopback. So what I've done is I create a thing called My Mic. And what I do is I select on the sources column, I select my MixPre, and I'm going to use output 7 and 8 from my MixPre, and I'm just going to hard patch into an imaginary output thing. I'm going to hard patch my microphone. And the reason we do it like that is that device, that becomes a device. A Loopback patch becomes a device in every audio input pull-down menu. So for example, if you look at this, I have my audio source for ScreenFlow. Look, I can select my mic. There's my audio source for QuickTime. Look, I can select my mic. And even the audio source for my Final Cut voiceover tool, I can select my mic. It exists everywhere that I might need an audio source, and it's just my mic. Now, internal to the MixPre, in order to do that, I do have to go in, and this is kind of deep, so I'm not going to go into it. But if you go into the USB output selectors for channels 7, output 7 and output 8, you just select analog input 1, analog input 1 on both of those, and that's how you get the microphone out those 7 and 8s. All right, next thing I want to do is I want to get into the mixer a little bit. This is SoundDesk. This is what it looks like. Now, this is populated with 6 inputs, 1 aux, and a master. Now, that's a total of 8 faders, and it's important to remember why I'm doing that. I'm doing 8 faders because that's all the Korg nanoKONTROL has. And once it starts on input 1, it's just going to take the first 8 things and assign it to the faders. So what I do is I have 6 inputs, I have 1 aux, and I have a master. And I wanted to have a master so I could only have 7, and I needed to have an aux so I could only have 6. So I basically get 6 inputs, the aux and the master. And if we go back to this, you can see if I click where it says aux send on any one of these channels, I get this aux select. So on everything that I might want to send out to broadcast, I select aux send, I come up to where it had said off, and I change it to post fader. And I've done that on inputs 1, 2, 3, and 4. I never want to send zoom back. I never want to send zoom back to zoom, and I never want to put my intercom back to zoom. And obviously the aux sends don't go out. Now you can see here that all of these inputs go to my master output except for the aux return, which goes to it goes to outputs 3 and 4, and then outputs 5 and 6 actually go to the speakers on my iMac Pro. So I have a bunch of inputs and I have 6 outputs, and I have total control over all of those. So let's take a look at this. What you think you want to do, is plug a bunch of apps into those inputs. You want to plug my Zoom into output 3, 4. I want to plug my headphones into output 1, 2, and I want to plug my Mac speakers into outputs 5 and 6. But the problem is you can't actually do that. And the reason you can't actually do that is this. The SoundDesk software only has the ability to have one input device and one output device. Well, that's crazy. So how do you deal with that? The way you deal with that is you create what are called aggregate input devices, and I'm calling it an aggregate output device, although I don't know that I've ever heard anybody talk about that. And I make those in Loopback. So I have a SoundDesk input and a SoundDesk output, and that would be this device here and this device here. And so what we do is we bring all of the apps I might want to listen to into that aggregate input device, and I now select just that one thing into SoundDesk. And I do the same thing on the output. I make a thing that has a lot of outputs, and I select that as my output. So we have input interface is SoundDesk input, output interface, SoundDesk output. Put the exclamation marks because it makes it easier to find things alphabetically. All right, and so let's take a little bit closer look at those individual things. Here's what my SoundDesk input patch looks like. I have a module here for each one of the apps that might make noise. And then I have 16 channels, which is 8 stereo inputs. And I hard patch each thing into a channel that I might want to assign in the mixer. And likewise on the output, I create a thing, a virtual output that has 6 outputs, because 2 of them are going to go to my headphones, 2 of them are going to go to Zoom, and 2 of them are going to go to the iMac speakers. Now you notice I don't have these actually patched here, and that's because these things actually want to look for just input 1 and 2, and it gets confusing, and we can talk about that in the show. A little bit closer look, here's my inputs, here's the things, and all of those become a single input to the mixer. Here's a little bit about the outputs, and I mentioned this. Here's my SoundDesk output module, and you'll notice the SoundDesk output module becomes a module inside 2 other modules. See that? SoundDesk output and SoundDesk output. And so this is what I send back into the MixPre so I can monitor everything, because I have my MixPre plugged into my headphone jack. And this is what I send out to Zoom. Now here's where, remember I said the zero latency is important? Outputs 3 and 4 out of the SoundDesk output module go to Zoom, but also my microphone. And that's how I get my mic plus everything else that I'm sending out to the world. That's how I get everything out to Zoom, by combining them right here in Loopback at the very last stage. I'm not trying to do a bunch of effects. I'm not trying to, mix an album here. I just need to gang my voice with anything that I might send out to Zoom. And let's see. Okay, this is a slightly another look at the same stuff. And the reason I really created this is down here on the MixPre. I'm going to take USB inputs 1 and 2 that come from Loopback, and they are going to be patched internally in the MixPre to be inputs 5 and 6 on the MixPre. And then that way I can grab the faders on the Korg that's attached to the MixPre. And here's the thing, by the way, I use 2 of the Korgs. One of them is just plugged into the MixPre to do MixPre stuff, and one of them is plugged into the Mac to do SoundDesk stuff. It's like having 2 MEs on your audio mixer. I don't know. They're cheap. They were easy to take a look at. All right, let's take one more look at the mixer interface. What we're going to do, if you come down here and you see this little tiny gear here, this is how you attach the Korg. By the way, this is how we're going to attach the Korg to the to SoundDesk. So if you come down here and click on this little tiny gear right here, you're going to see this other window pop up, and it's the MIDI desk control. I don't know what most of this stuff means. I apologize, but this is what you need to do. Under Protocol, select CC. Under MIDI Input 1, you're going to see nanoKONTROLler. Select that. These numbers here, 0, 16, 32, and 48, become very important because once you launch the Korg edit control software and double-click on the unit that you're actually using, you'll get this device, and you'll notice that these numbers here, so here, right across here, here's my fader ID numbers, 0 through 7. So you come over here to fader, and it's like, oh, 0, and it just assumes you know, through 7. So 0 through 7. Pans, these knobs up here are pans, 16 through whatever. Here, let me make this a little bigger. 16 through whatever. And right here, it's 16, counting up 8 there. And the same thing goes true with solo and mute. So anyway, that's a very quick rundown of how all this stuff is set up. On the Office Hours show, we can do a Q&A, and I can answer any specific questions. Feel free to take this video, rewind it, watch a couple of times, commit it to memory, you know, take a nap with it, whatever you want to do. Anyway, thanks for listening. Later.